So how about emphasis for you? How do you go about talking about your faith now? Somebody says, you religious?
If they ask that?
Yeah. You religious, mate?
Yeah. I mean, you could.
What do you believe?
Are we mocking a whole?
Yeah. I am that inquirer at this point.
What do you believe?
What do you believe? Yeah.
If
Are
you
you
were
a Christian?
If you were to ask that, I would just try to reverse the tables and get them to be answering my
So you'd be a
questions.
politician. Okay.
I would sooner try to deflect well, because I don't know. I'm more curious about what they think than what I think. I already know that, so
Interesting.
I would go that route. Like, why do you ask? What's important to you about this? You know?
Yeah.
And pretty quickly people will start talking about themselves.
Yeah,
so,
sure. Like if they're religious and
yeah.
Like
you, I'm much less inclined to, like come right out of the gates and try to convince them to change their preconceived ideas or cherished beliefs, and instead, get into that relationship. I'd like to establish trust in that you could talk to me about anything, and I won't think that you're like unsaved or lost or something. I'm just not really like trying to trade in those categories.
Yeah.
I just want to respect that person as I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you are a charitable, like genuine inquirer.
Yep.
Rather than someone with an agenda. Now, sometimes they can lose that if you like come out really militant and you're just trying to like pick a fight or something.
Yeah.
But I'm finding that happens less and less now, even with the interactions online so far with this platform that I've had on YouTube and some of the comments. I mean, there's a way to like kind of dismantle the armaments of war that someone comes to the table with just by being curious and asking good questions. And it kind of lets people's guard down, like, oh, okay, you actually want to have a conversation where you hear my perspective, and so you're not just gonna parrot
That's good, man.
some great truths that I already know, like you probably think that. So
yeah, that's really good. I think there is more of a willingness now to entertain and another person's ideas and being willing to hear them. Almost like, as much as I say I would emphasize Jesus, when somebody wants to press me on what I believe, I will emphasize Jesus, but I'm much more willing to stay quiet about which camp I might belong in. Sort of becoming all things to all people, you know? Like, I'd rather keep the conversation going and really hear what you have to say and where you're coming from. And eventually we will probably find some common ground somewhere.
Right.
Whereas before, I almost took pride in setting myself apart as like, yep, loyal to Jesus, and that might alienate you, or that might, I don't care if that offends you. And now I actually do care if it offends you. Not that I would be ashamed of Christ, but like, I want to keep the relationship going so you can see Christ's goodness for yourself, you know? So, whereas I would have maybe called myself a coward in the past, I guess. Ashamed of the gospel.
Yeah. I mean, usually, and if you'll allow me for a moment, I suppose, with like my strategy, so to speak, if I were to, once I've laid that groundwork for trust and safety, I don't know if anyone else is annoyed, but I annoy myself with that word sometimes.
Safety?
But, a little bit.
Okay.
Just, I don't know. It's a little bit soft. But, but yeah, like they can trust me and we can be honest with each other and have a actually good conversation. Okay, once that's been established, now kind of what I've been working on in some of my professional work is thinking through how to approach spiritual conversations with a religious inquirer, someone who wants to know whether God exists and what God is like.
Yeah.
In a way that is appealing to anyone that's just in that broad category of a seeker, a searcher.
Right.
And so really trying to harness their own self-interest in the matter, making the project feel more real, more central, more existentially gripping to them.
Yep.
Instead of what can sometimes be just this abstract endeavor to find out another truth about the world. Like, oh yeah, there's a God out there.
More accurate metaphysic or something. Yeah.
Yeah, but really coming at the whole conversation in a way that is like, you should really care about this. And less, I mean, well, what's interesting is, I guess I've kind of come full circle. I could have just said the same exact thing to describe what I used to do with
I
the
know.
gospel tracts.
I was just thinking that. You should really care about this.
With the, I
You
guess
stand guilty.
the threat of hell.
Yeah.
So I'm just not at all trying to play that game anymore.
Yeah.
That's not the card I lead with, that you are in danger of this eternal fate. But rather, no, there are some great goods that you stand to lose if, there isn't a God.
Can you unpack that a bit for me? What would those be? What would be some of the questions you would lead with?
Sure. So I try to paint what seems to be the universal human predicament, the situation that we all find ourselves in, but that is categorically bad. It's like a bad situation to be in.
There's a problem we're all facing.
And it is it should be of genuine interest to you to find out if there's a solution to that problem. And the problem is threefold. One, there is this possibility that you will cease to exist at some point. Now you might say, oh, that's obvious. We're going to die. Yeah. Like your physical body will shut down and fail to operate. But the open question is then whether do you, Tony, die at that moment? So another way of putting it is, does your personal death coincide with your physical death? And of course, an atheist or a naturalist would say, well, yeah, because all I am is a physical thing. So when the body dies, then I'm dead.
Yep.
Okay. But there's this open question, maybe human beings are souls. So again, like this whole strategy is trying to presume as little as possible about anyone's metaphysical or even ethical commitments.
Yeah.
But just, aren't you interested in persisting?
Continuing to exist.
And those you love, like everything that you've ever worked for, that you've cared about, that holds some kind of value in your life, will, it seems to, come to an end at some point.
We talked about that in that Stoicism episode, you know, coming to terms with the transient nature of basically everything you've loved in your life.
And I find that to be a predicament, a bad situation to be in. I would like the things that I care about to persist. And so I have a real stake in the game to want to know if there's a way out of that predicament. Okay?
Yep.
Part 2, moral failure. We are all in this predicament of having trenchant moral failure. We're steeped in it, and we can't pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps as hard as we try. There is a point
you think
at which...
that's true? Because we make moral progress, though, don't we?
Yeah, perhaps in some areas, and then maybe not so much in others.
Yeah. It's a question that I am interested in. To what degree are we capable of self-improvement? Because the Christian message, I think, well, correct me if I'm wrong about this.
Sure.
Maybe I'm in two minds about it. Christian message is, there's nothing you can do to make yourself perfect. There's nothing you can never sort of score enough points. You can never do enough good to be worthy of God's favor or something. So God's love is unconditional for you. It's not dependent on what you do. Or you could say you had a debt that Christ paid, and now there's all the sorts of language for atonement and how that works. But also there is a message of sanctification that as you walk with Christ or walk with God and develop a relationship with him, that he will begin to point out things in your life. You need to change this. Stop saying that. Stop doing this. That's not good for you or people around you. And there's some sort of cooperation that needs to happen where I'm getting this prompting. I need to change this about my life. And then I can actually act that out. I can make a change. Like you meet, I don't know, alcoholics who are recovering and they are no longer, living in the gutter.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So what's your claim exactly? That we
so
face...
that what you just described is totally consonant with what I'm saying.
Yep.
Because in that story, there was an outside helper that came along and assisted to some degree in that moral journey. And again, you still did not describe someone, like what it really looks like and what it means for someone to traverse the moral journey from to whatever degree ransacked by moral failure to blamelessness.
Yeah.
To where you reach a point where you no longer morally err.
Right.
Wow. I mean, none of us are even close to that.
Right.
Yeah.
So moral...
And that seems like a bad thing, like by definition almost. Right. If we're using that valuation term bad or undesirable in any way, then any kind of immorality would surely fall in that camp. And you'd have an inherent interest in seeing that go to zero.
It would be better if we were all morally perfect.
I do. Yeah. I mean, yeah, man. Can I help myself to that? Or apparently I've had to spend a few chapters in my dissertation defending
explaining that.
But
yeah. So for the atheist who says moral progress is capable without God,
that's really
it's possible without God.
That's the flashpoint. Is that part about can we pull ourselves up our own bootstraps?
That's a different question than can we attain perfection, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But,
well, you'd have to say yes, and then how can we do it?
Yeah.
Can I do it, or can we do it by ourselves?
Yeah.
And the broadly speaking humanist project or that worldview is to say that any type of good is securable within the human species' power to attain. And so, like a moral humanist might say, moral blamelessness is attainable by either individual or the collective efforts of human beings. However long that might, it might take a million years longer, but eventually we could get there by our own devices.
But you're saying you don't differ from them too much in that you just say we could get there, but it would be with the help of a divine being that's sort of pulling us forward into moral progress in some way.
That's right. I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some kind of a guiding hand for it all. Okay. So death, moral failing.
And then the third one is the apparent gratuity of evil and suffering. And gratuity just meaning like you would pay gratuity at a restaurant. It's a tip. It's over and above the amount that you were charged.
Except it's not in this country. People expect it.
Right.
Do you remember that first when I was still learning that?
Yeah.
I walked out of a Steak and Shake. You said security was going to chase me down. Didn't even know what I was doing.
So over the top and abundance. So applying that to evil, it seems like that evil is over the top in our world and suffering. There's more than needs to be for the amount of possible good that could come from it. We all get that there's some redemptive suffering, or there's some small evils that you allow in order for a great good to come. Really simple example would be like working out. I am breaking my muscle down.
Yeah.
It's
painful.
It's being wounded, or the pain that may come from getting a root canal at the dentist. Well, it's for the purpose of some greater good in the future, or punishing a child, and or reprimanding and sending them to the room. There's some psychological suffering.
Yeah.
But it's to produce like a well-functioning adult in the future, hopefully. All these cases seem pretty clear, or at least that concept is open, right?
Yeah.
That's a viable concept. The question is all evil like that?
Or is there some that's just purposeless?
I think it's fair to say it seems to all of us that just without thinking about it too much, just on the face of it, like, oh man, that seems so over the top and unnecessary to produce some good.
Like, I think about the times when I've been in the most pain I've been in, whether it's I broke my ankle or whatever. Did it have to hurt quite that much? Could it have hurt just a little bit less and still produce whatever goods it happened to produce as knock-on effects?
Yeah, I mean, or I don't know, there's a whole host of illnesses that are completely bonkers hard to even wrap the mind around. Like, just what came to mind immediately was the anencephalic children that are born without like an upper brain, basically, and it's just very short, sad little life.
Wow.
You could throw in the suffering from certain natural disasters, hurricanes,
people getting trapped and drowning.
Did the hurricane have to be that big and whirl at this exact speed at this time to destroy this thing? And I mean, you get into a lot of difficult problem of evil questions. That's a whole other podcast that we did a few months back and related it to COVID specifically.
So how does your...
So just to loop that back in, that is a predicament we all find ourselves in, that the world appears to be full, or at least have a great deal of gratuitous evil.
Right.
So that sucks to be in that world compared to this other. There's a way the world could be where it's not that way, right? And maybe I can tell that I grapple with that. Someone that would
whether
question
that's
that
true. Yeah.
in the paper, but suffice it to say, I think most people would be on board with that. And so to be saved or rescued from that predicament would be for a being to ensure that it's in fact not gratuitous. To have enough power and moral goodness and intellect to engineer the world in such a way that such evils are not in fact over the top, but are exactly necessary or permissible to achieve some good.
Yep. Okay. I can see how that would be a better world to be in, where there's a being like that. Crucially, I remember from a previous episode you saying when it comes to laying out those three, at least gets me to say, yes, I see why these are issues I should be concerned with. Do you have hope of this rescue? Or do you have hope of some answer to these problems?
And yeah, so what I do with that, so once we come to an agreement, and again, if someone disagrees with me, I'm not going to like knock on their door for the next week and plead with them. I'm just not in that space anymore. But if we're on the same page, like this is the human predicament. These are bad. These three things are genuinely bad, and we should want to find a way out of them. So I want to convince that person you have a vested interest in seeing if there's a solution. Okay. So what I try to do then is let's just call God. There's that word that means a lot of different things depending on where you're from. But for the sake of this discussion of religious inquiry, that is wanting to know whether God exists and what God is like, let's just call God that being that is willing and able to rescue you from that predicament. Forget everything else that you've heard about God, because it just gets so darn confusing and interwoven into like your past church experience or whatever, and these world religions and all these like really specific theological claims and doctrines. Just hold up, just move all that back and let's start here. You care about this. This is existentially important to you and to everyone. In virtue of being a human, this matters. And so let's call God the thing that can rescue humanity from that.
Yep.